Fantastic. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are in the world. My name is Naledi Cabo on behalf of the Africa Tourism Association. Welcome to the Exchange. The Exchange.Africa was created in the midst and in response to the exceptional circumstances as a result of the coronavirus pandemic on the hospitality, tourism, and meetings industry. While we're unable to interact live, we can take this time to further our education, develop new skills, and connect virtually. So the exchange features a series of conversations that focus on Africa travel from various perspectives. We're very happy that we have partnered with Index Select to bring you some of these conversations. And now allow me to turn you over to Wazha Dube of Index Select, who will introduce our special guest and lead us through the Beyond Conversation, Communities Conversation. I hope you find it valuable and impactful.
Thank you, Naledi. Good morning, everyone, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us for this conversation in partnership with ATA. Now, as you may know, we've started our Live with Index conversation, so this is in partnership with that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Wazha Dube. I am the African manager at Index Select. And today I'm joined by a friend and a man who needs very little introduction, especially if you're a lover of Africa, Mr. Beks Ndlovu, who is the founder of African Bush Camps and also Safari Guide. Thank you for joining us today, Beks.
Thank you very much, Wazha.
And so today, we'll be talking about how the communities that supply and support the multiple aspects of tourism have been under threat since the pandemic started. And of course, while there are so many different types of tourism throughout the continent, I think it goes without saying that the majority of that income generated is focused on the continent's wildlife tourism and areas in these rural areas. And so just like the animals and areas that we love so much, these communities that support the wildlife and experiences that we love so much are now, of course, more than ever, under threat, especially from the economic ramifications that have been posed now by the corona pandemic. So with all that said, we want to talk today about these very communities and why it's so important that in this time that it's so important, we keep the mantra of postpone, don't cancel your trips, and encourage the tourism community abroad as well as locally, as well as all travelers and all lovers of Africa to support these efforts being made by folks like Beks and so many other partners on the ground to promote and support these communities. So that's my little ramble. I don't want to get on too much. We've got the specialist with us. So Beks, just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about ABC and how you started, why and how you started the African Bush Camps Foundation and some of the projects that you have going on throughout the different areas in Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe?
Thanks, thanks very much, Wazha. We started African Bush Camps in 2006 with our first camp in Wanga National Park in Zimbabwe with Somalisa. But from the get-go, we've always known that we don't exist just as a tourism commercial business, but also it was important for us to have an extension or an arm that gives back to communities and gets involved in conservation of the very resource that we're also passionate about. And really the creation of African Bush Camps was a vision from having traveled all over Africa and come to a realization that, guiding on my own and running a business on my own as a one-man show was not going to address the level of impact that we needed to have. Having seen all the issues concerning the devastation of wildlife, the impoverished communities that benefit very little from wildlife. And really, so that had to be addressed alongside running a tourism. And that's why we talk about a sustainable tourism model, which is really starting a tourism business which not only satisfies economic activity, but also satisfies conservation and the handling lightly of the balances or the imbalances rather with local communities. So that was in 2006. And since then, Wazha, we've had over 72 projects through the foundation. And 42 projects are live at the moment between 3 countries, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Botswana. And the real model really is that wherever there are communities alongside where any one of our camps operate, we want to get involved as part of that community in bringing them into the tourism scope. It's no longer enough to say just because you're renting land off people or because you're employing people that you're having an effect on a community. It's really about getting quite deep and making sure that you understand the needs of a community and you can get them highly involved in being part of the fight against the devastation of wildlife and our wilderness areas. So for us, as a business, we fund the foundation, and this year's budget was said to be just under $1 million worth of funding that we would raise through our donors, through some of our guests, but also predominantly through the commercial activity of the business. And that's why, and we'll get onto it, I'm sure, and talk about the devastation of what zero tourism does in a year like this, to the ability that commercial ventures like ours have in trying to be effective in these communities, despite our commitment. But, you know, 1 in every 10 jobs in this part of the world is tourism related. That's no different in our part of the world. And certainly the scope is that for every person that we employ, that person affects 8 to 10 other lives, a livelihood. But, you know, there's a whole tourism economy within these communities that we try to engage and get involved in and promote, whether it's through our camps or through our relevant partners, in terms of just making sure that we can find them a market, not just in our camps for economic activity, but in the greater landscape. So we're very excited. We've had to obviously adapt and act very quickly. And say to ourselves as a business that, you know, our commitment is to protect the investment that we've made over the last 16 years in our communities. This is not a time to back off. In fact, if anything, it's a time to really up our game in terms of our efforts, because people suffering would result definitely in a lot of illegal activity, but also just in the complete downfalling of the work that we've spent so much time and resources working through with our communities. So it's been very important for us to recognize that and make that a priority.
Absolutely. And to that effect, I think a lot of people, I mean, from the whole supply chain have, you know, obviously cancellations have been a very big part of, for any travel consultant, anyone within the supply chain, to talk about, you know, why we have insisted and hope that our travelers don't cancel and they postpone. And to that effect, why do you think that's so important for safari camps and properties like you guys and other partners on the continent to keep that mantra and make sure that we've got those dollars staying within the community?
Yeah, thanks. You know, a lot of people have this idea. I think a lot of our guests, our clients, have this idea that the cost of a safari is really redeemed when people actually come to travel. And that's usually 6 to 12 months later, as you know, people book in advance. Mm-hmm. What needs, I think, to be done is high-level education to the end client, to the end consumer, to say there's a lot of investment that goes into making sure that by the time they arrive in a safari camp, they're given that high level of service that they expect by well-skilled people who are inspired and who have benefited from tourism, but also so that the guests are able to benefit from the resource that has been protected in advance by the local communities, by ourselves, in the programs that we put out there to make sure that the product stays solid. You know, putting food on the table 6 to 12 months later and putting wine on the table for the guest is one of the least of the cost of a safari. So that's got to be recognized. And one of the reasons why, if I can refer to it, it's like having an order book. You know, if your order book is not full and does not have orders, you don't really have a business in the future. You can't start to plan economic activity. You can't start to plan a lot of these long-term projects that we're doing within our communities. It's very difficult for us to have a focus in how to grow the business, how to grow the foundation as it was during the course of last year, because of the advanced bookings that we have in the order book, we're able to say, well, next year we project that we're going to have X amount of revenue into our business. And because we give, it's worked out over the last 3 years that we give at least 2.5% of total revenue towards our foundation, so that we can run our foundation without having to ask our guests or our partners to donate towards the administration of the foundation. So a lot of those funds go directly into the community, and we're able to say, this year we're going to raise this much because we know that we give 2.5%. And based on the projections that we have and the order book, we're able to say, well, we can then get involved in these long-term projects that will have a long-term sustained future. A lot of projects that fail within communities and in conservation is because of a lack of long-term overview of what revenue is coming. So the projects are always very short-term, they're not long-term. And in fact, in those cases where there's short-term projects, we've often found that they've got a long-term devastating effect when the money dries out. So the system really is sustained so that we can look after these vast wilderness areas ahead of time and still continue to have the product when people decide to travel in 12 months' time or 6 months' time or whenever we can all start traveling again. So it's very important that people understand that, that really it's for the future, and most safari camps, unlike big hotels, have got very limited inventory. So it's very important to know that we've got this year covered and those beds are sold in advance. Thankfully, next year, all our camps are looking very positive with the postponements that we have. It is really deferred guests from this year. And thankfully, a lot of people have been very supportive of the mantra of postpone, travel later. So we're very pleased with that. But the education needs to just go far wider, I believe, out in the marketplace, and getting people to understand the value of being able to put the commitment on the table. Without a commitment on the table, you really only have a provisional booking, and it's not great for future planning.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'm seeing some questions, Roland, and I did forget to say, so for anyone who has any questions, please make sure you put them in the Q&A chat box. We will be answering those as we continue. We've got some more great questions for Beks ramping up. So now reflecting on that, because again, you started the foundation in African bush camps in 2006. Since then, we had the recession of 2008, as well as the Ebola pandemic. What were some of the challenges that you, your camps, and the foundation faced during that time of economic hardship at that time, and what did you see as some of the challenges that you now anticipate now with this new economic hardships that we have now?
Yeah, sure. You know, I touched on a little bit about how we believe that tourism needs to benefit the local communities. And because we run this foundation, you know, our ability to give to the foundation is directly related to our occupancies and a number of people that are actually going to be visiting our camps. So the anticipated revenue figures that we were expecting this year that would translate to resources that we can put towards our foundation have been severely impacted. And what that means is that you've got people on reduced working hours throughout the industry, which means that people are earning less, and people's ability to support the livelihoods of 8 to 10 people, that ability is greatly reduced. What this means is that people generally would like to try and make up for that revenue in other areas. And it could be through increased agricultural farming activities, and some of these areas are ecologically sensitive. It could also be turning to bushmeat, for example, for survival. Yes. In cases that we're already seeing this upsurge as of 8 weeks ago, where communities are being hard hit also by commercial illegal poaching activities. But you know, people will want to feed their kids, and if there's wildlife, you can't really blame them for wanting to sustain their families. Mm-hmm. But this goes far much wider than just sustaining their families, because some of the bushmeat would be hunted and on-sold to other people that don't necessarily have access to it. Mm-hmm. So this cascading effect will affect wildlife, but it will also affect communities. And we're certainly seeing it in these areas where people have been reduced because even for businesses like ourselves, we've had to reduce people's time up to something like 25% for the most part, which is a huge impact into earnings. And it's not as though there's a period of time where there's alternative employment or alternative economic activity. So we saw this during the times of Ebola, world recession, and we're seeing it now, of course, during this period of time. So yes, it's definitely going to have that effect. And the longer this pursues, the more difficult that it becomes. And so we're trying to address those issues in supporting also the local authorities during this time, particularly the National Park Service, who are the wildlife authorities, in really making sure that for everything from security to making sure that their staff are also well equipped to deal with the crisis, that this is an ongoing project all around. But there are other activities that we've decided to take on around provisions of water, sanitation, health, hygiene, and to really continue making sure that we empower the elders in those communities to try and lessen the blow during this time of COVID.
Yeah, great, and that's amazing. We've been seeing some of your projects that you have been doing, like the Tippy Taps project, and those to really educate the communities, which has been really so amazing. But like you said, with the economic freeze, we hope that this will be over sooner rather than later, so we can get folks back to work and everything. And with that said, though, what are you seeing in terms of, for your supporters of the foundation, the existing supporters, how have they been helping you and the foundation to support the communities and also the staff, of course, that, the staff that work at ABC are also come from the very communities that we support. So how have you guys been supporting them through your donors and your supporters of the foundation so far?
So there's a number of programs that we're embarking right now to both for health hygiene, but also for a bit of economic activity. So the Tippy Tap project that you mentioned earlier on is basically where we're supplying an enormous amount of both water, soap stations, where there's Tippy Tap. We call it Tippy Tap because it's basically a 5-liter container of water station at a time. And it's operated using your foot, so you don't have to touch it, and it tips over, hence Tippy Tap. You tap with your foot and it tips over. You're able to wash your hands, and there's a bar of soap hanging on a string so that you can also utilize that. As you can imagine, after a series of drought years that we've had, water is not particularly readily available in a lot of these areas. And so to really promote hygiene in these places, we've gone ahead and done that. And we're busy looking at rolling that project in 3 communities, in the Chobe Enclave, in Botswana, around the Wange area, and around the Kariba area. And with that, we are also having a lot of masks made, and some of these masks that are being made, and all the inputs that are being made, as much as possible, we try to have the communities actually design and make those, and of course they get paid for that. So wherever we can, we're trying to promote that kind of economic activity where we don't form a false economy per se. We believe in making sure that the level of business that we're providing is sustainable. We've got the sewing projects, which largely are composed of anything from 8 to 12 people, and largely women that are providing for their families. This is a good time for them to be able to make protective gear that we can all utilize both in our camps for our staff. We're looking at them in the future producing some of this for our guests in our camps. So these kind of activities are very important to sustain these communities. We also have a goat rearing project that's been ongoing for quite a while. And of course, during this time, that's very good provisions for protein. We're looking to try and see how we can collaborate with local communities in trying to harvest some of their livestock in the future to be able to provide sustained protein levels for our game rangers who, of course, are needing that source of protein. Especially now with the increased level of work and surveillance that they have to do. So it's these kind of projects that we're targeting, being able to keep the local tourism economy in that sense still going during these tough times.
Thank you for that. And Beks, now kind of looking towards the future, what do you see as some of the changes that that will need to be made in terms of supporting the local communities, bringing more attention to the backbone of the local communities, and how much how important they are to tourism, and as an industry, what do you think needs to really be made for us to go forward to make sure that we have proper and sustainable support for communities and for the conservation efforts that they make?
So I believe that we've gone quite a ways as a tourism community. Most businesses are really putting a lot of work, sustained work into communities, into wildlife. And it's been particularly very encouraging to see how a lot of tourism, the community has really stepped up even during this time. And we've all known what we have to do in order to involve local communities, but I feel like this has really taken a turn and highlighted the need for us to become economically robust, and tailor our models, our economic models, so that we can survive the pandemics coming up in the future. COVID-19, I believe is like I've always been saying, that it's a bit of a slap in the face right now, but it's there to stay, and it is very possible that other pandemics will come up again in the future. And myself and our shareholders are constantly studying that and saying, what is it that we can do to our business model today to make sure that we've got a much larger cushion that we can have to fight some of these pandemics, and to be readily available for the wildlife and the communities. And it's really, I think as a tourism industry, we've got to probably relook at the business model, look at the trade channels, and see how we can all educate our end user, our consumers, a lot more, to get a lot more involved in this fight against conservation, and also to sustain our communities. I think what we found in the future is that a lot of people arrive and they're wowed by the amount of work that we do with our communities. They're wowed by the amount of work that we put into conservation. That shouldn't be the case. People should arrive already sensitized, already knowing why they're spending their money with us, and why they're traveling with us, and why they've booked through a responsible operator in the US or wherever in the source market, to make sure that those people are educated even further, and we get people's buy-in, so that people don't arrive in our camps and say, well, I wish we knew, because then we would have done this, or we could have done more.
And that's definitely, on the responsibility of the operators and the agents to really educate their travelers on what they should expect and where their money is going. So that's so important.
Just in terms of some of the conservation initiatives, as you know, Wazha, in Zimbabwe, in our camps, we've been charging a conservation levy.
Yes.
We started off at $10 per bed night, then it went to 15, and it's now sitting at 20. And that's allowed us to really effectively contribute and create a whole new fund through collaborative efforts with other operators, including our competitors, and really saying we need to cooperate. That's the next level of really achieving high results in terms of conservation and supporting communities. That levy we hadn't introduced in our Botswana camps, but as of next year, we are going to be introducing a $20 per bed night levy to our guests, which is huge, big support in terms of being able to sustain the numbers and have, through tourism, a fund that is robust, that can allow us to tap into in order to do the work that we need to do and sustain us even during these times. So we're very excited about that. And really what that is a partnership with our guests in making sure that we've got resources to be able to save a global asset. I've always said that, we don't own the wildlife merely because of our proximity to it. We are the custodians that need to act responsibly and partner with the rest of the world in making sure that we have this wildlife indefinitely.
I think it must be said, that's such a good point. I think it must be said that, with more education, more of a spotlight being put on by the industry, to tell travelers where that money is going, now letting clients know where that money is going, that levy, they feel, they do feel like they're giving more of an impact, they have more of an impact on their trip. And it really has, in my opinion, changed the way that we have now seen a lot of travel to the areas, and people want to get more involved. So even, it's a shame you've not got it in Botswana yet from my home country, but hopefully, but it'll be good once we've got that and people can see where their money is going directly. And now to touch on a point that that you had mentioned before about agriculture and people reverting back. There has obviously been a fear that with the economic freeze of tourism, that communities will go back to reverting to agricultural farming, and with that there will be an increase of animal and human conflict, and even hunting, for whether that's more for illegal hunting rather than for poaching. To that respect, how are you and others, other camps and properties working with the communities to preserve the wild areas and to really make sure that that doesn't happen, but at the same time they feel that they have support from you and the tourism community?
So when we talk about these communities, what needs to be put into perspective is that our staff, who are really are sort of the front line, our responsibility as a business to make sure that our staff are the extension of the communities in the outskirts of these places where we operate. So we really learn quite a lot from our own staff, who we believe if we look after our staff, that really incorporates us as part of the community, and we're better informed of what's happening within these communities and what we as a business can do to better their livelihoods. So one of the things that we've done is we have not laid anybody off. We have not retrenched any staff in all our camps. And we've got over 600 people throughout the organization, most of which are camp staff from these communities. And one of the reasons why we haven't retrenched any staff, look, we've been very fortunate to be in a good financial position to be able to keep staff on, but we all made a decision together, having given everybody an option of various options. We said, look, we need to rally together and share the pain during this time. And so that when this passes over and we're able to reopen, all the work that we've put into upskilling people, all the training, is not gone to waste, yes. And that people have a job to look forward to going back to. That's really kept people very, very inspired, to the extent that we have used our own staff as part of the ambassadors for the wildlife back in their communities. So we're working and getting them involved. We've always had our staff, we've always had our foundation ambassadors based in each camp that educate our guests, that are responsible for educating other staff members. And that's really where it started. So during this period of time, whilst we have reduced numbers in camp, it doesn't mean that our staff are not being effective back in the villages. So we're working hand in hand with our staff in order for us to achieve these objectives. And earlier on, I talked a bit more about why it's important for us to actually up our game even more during these desperate times and work through local leadership in order to achieve the projects that we want to. And all of this is recognized as part of a tourism result-driven model. So the communities realize that the support that they're getting through the initiatives, the goat rearing project, the tipi-tap projects that we're launching, all those are initiatives and demonstrations to the community why it's important for us to have a wildlife base, so that we're able to have tourism so that they can benefit, not only just in the good times, but also in times such as these. The economic activity through the sewing ladies that will be making masks and various other apparel during this time, all those people are supporting 8 to 10 people. And so that kind of cascading effect and benefit is really important for people in these communities. And I think it's those things that are going to ensure that wildlife survives through this period of time. And it's not just our organization doing that. There's a lot of our competitors rallying together and collaborating and also doing the same. And this is why I think we all are so passionate about what we do, is that even when the chips are down, even more so, we're able to rally behind each other and forget about competition and say, what are we going to do collectively for the landscape? Because we all have a common goal. So it's been very encouraging to see that, Wazha, and those are some of the initiatives that we're carrying out during this period of time.
Great. And so before I ask, so one last question before we open this up to our audience. what are some of the ways on how anyone who's listening or any of your clients or any donors can support the foundation and right now, and what are some of the projects that we can expect in the near future?
On our website, africanbushcamps.com, there is a link for the foundation that people can go on, and we've actually recently updated our donation options on our website. And so people would normally donate through our website, or they can contact us through social media. We also are in partnership with Bumi Hills Foundation, where we have a security anti-poaching unit that does a phenomenal job in the Kariba Matusadona area. So they can also go to bumihillsfoundation.org, and we have a donation option there. But certainly contact us via social media. We're very active, and if people want to donate, that would go a very long way. But the biggest thing that people can do, Wazha, for us is book their future travel. And right now, we're saying to people, we know that financially this is a very tough time for a lot of people. But if people want to continue the dream at this point, you know, they can work with us. We can help them book their safari for a limited period of time. And we don't necessarily require a financial commitment right away. But what that does is give us an idea of where people want to travel and when people want to travel. And the best way to really support us is to travel with African Bush Camps. And the best way that people can support our cause who've already booked with us is to postpone and not cancel.
And there is actually one itinerary for those who are watching who don't know about it, called Community and Conservation, that Beks and his team created early this year. And it is an absolutely phenomenal program that takes you through some of the best products within ABC, but also you get to meet and interact with the communities. So that one, if you've not checked that out, please let us know. I can get it out to you, but make sure you also go to africanbushcamps.com for that. So with that, I'd like to open this up to a few questions. I see we've got some from our lovely followers. So Bex, let's do a few questions here, shall we?
Yes, absolutely. So one question that I see from someone is they're asking, why don't we appoint someone in tourism, an officer who can visit poor communities and rural sites and hear directly from the people who are supposed to get the relief? Many times the funds do not filter through and mostly get spent on admin. It's a very good question. And one of the things that I advocated earlier on is our support as a business to our own foundation, to the extent that as a business, we pay for all the administration costs of our foundation. And that when we say we pay that from our bottom line. Okay, and the reason why we do that is because when we go out and advocate for a particular project and say, we want to embark on a project, build a road for a community that's going to provide so much relief, and that road is going to cost $1,000. When we go out and raise $1,000 from our audience, that full $1,000 goes towards the community and to the people that need it the most. None of it goes to admin. And as a matter of fact, the way that we operate with our community is talking about appointing somebody from tourism. In each of the places that we operate, we have what we call our project field officers. Mm-hmm. And these field officers are people from those communities that we employ that actually go out and visit the people that get the information for us. If we go out and do what we call an assessment, we often, when we're in communities, if we're going to start a new project, we do a lot of research and we do a lot of assessment just to find out what the needs are and what are some of the projects that have been done in the past, what have been the failures, what have been the successes. And it's these field officers that are fully employed and part of the foundation team that we send out there to make sure that whatever we do, we spend wisely, and whatever we do, we choose wisely in terms of the projects that we then fund and pursue.
Great. I've got another question here. Do you have a document that gives numbers and explanations that you just gave, Bex, of the role of forward bookings for your planning of donations needed for the foundation? From Mr. Holden.
Yeah, we keep obviously ahead of time. We know what our bookings are for the future. At least what we've got on the books right now with the postponement, for example, for 2021. So we are able to obviously keep a tally of that and say today that this is how much we can apportion to our foundation, this is how much we can apportion to certain projects. But we do have a project listing of all our projects, how much they're going to cost, what their monthly aspirations are. We've got certain projects that we had to put on hold. We've got the costings of them in terms of how much will it cost us per month, and what do we need to do to scale those projects for the future. So we definitely have that. We have a full-time foundation management team that works out obviously monthly budgets, annual budgets, and it's through that we can plan for the future. So any donations or any projects that we put out, we update this on our website. We make sure that it's very clear and very transparent what it's going to cost and what it's going to take for the future. So I hope that answers the question.
Hopefully, hope it does. This one's actually a good one. I know we've been getting a lot of questions about. To get safaris rolling again, can you touch on any new protocols that you've made to keep clients safe from the virus on safari and at your camps and lodges?
So I think first and foremost, what's important is to recognize that we have our staff that are in camp that are going to be exposed in the future. So there's a lot of education at the moment going on with our teams of staff through our management on what and understanding what coronavirus is and what the risks are associated with it. And we have come up with a document that is a work in progress as to what a safari looks like when we do open up, and it starts with our team, really around much extreme hygiene preparation and processes around kitchens, around distancing and separation, so no communal tables, no buffets, hand sanitizers on arrival, temperature checks when staff come on duty, temperature checks when staff arrive after days off, and obviously all the other regulatory imposed stuff that we'll probably all have to do. I think that with us opening in 2 months' time, it is likely that in the next 2 to 3 months, we will have a very different approach to COVID-19 than we currently do. We'll know a lot more then than we know now, just as much as we know much more today than we did 2-3 months ago.
Yes.
So with that, there will be a rollout from the tourism organization. There'll be a set of guidelines and there'll be our set of guidelines. So the days of being able to roll rooms over within an hour, guest checks in, next guest checks, the guest checks out straight after. I think that is going to change in the future. Obviously, the concern there is around the wet rooms, making sure that those facilities are dry and are safe before the next set of people come in. But that's about all that we can do really, because you've got to understand that these places are quite remote and we're not health experts. So all we can do is to go into very extreme hygiene preparations. One of the changes that we're probably going to have to make, and we're looking into that now, is we're interviewing a group of nurses. And one of the things that we're considering is to actually have a full-time nurse in each camp and at the airport on departure, to make sure that we keep accurate records, temperature checks, which is going to be quite an important thing, and all the other hygienic stuff of being able to sanitize, etc. So these are all things that are rolling out as we speak, and I don't think that at this point we can be very definitive about some of the things. Obviously, one of the things that we would consider is making sure that we reduce the number of people in game drive vehicles, for example. We've always been very low, 6 people over 9 seats. We may reduce that. But like with everything else, there's a cost implication. If the WHO comes out and says, well, you're going to have to test your guests 3 times a day and test your staff 3 times a day at $50 a pop, somebody's got to shoulder that cost.
Yeah.
So these are the things that I think largely we're learning during this curl up period, so that by the time we roll this out, our staff are well informed, and that we're doing whatever we can in terms of measures to make sure that the deep cleaning, kitchen etiquette, all of that is strictly adhered to. And that we've got the safety officers in place that will make sure that this whole process is heavily managed.
Great. Well, with that, I think we're going to end on that part unless there's any last questions. For the most part, though, I will be answering these questions to sending it out to you all individually. I know who you all are. But I want to thank you, Beks, and your whole team for joining us today and for telling us more about the communities and what we can do and play our part to support the communities and the staff that make the experiences that we love so much so amazing. And of course to ATA at the Exchange for partnering with us on this, and of course all of you who took the time out to listen to us and of course to share your thoughts and opinions. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email myself at wazha@indexselect.com. Of course, you can reach out to Beks and the team at ABC. And with that, I want to thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, Beks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Wazha.
Take care.